What is going on, you guys? So, Clone Wars is coming to X-Wing and Legion, but what about Armada? So this is pretty much a pretty hot question right now, so I just thought I would dedicate a video to talking about this one question, and it's a big question because I feel like Armada was made for the Clone Wars to shine. There's just so much more of a variety of ships and a lot more fleet battles that you really see in the Clone Wars, especially the show, but also, you know, especially that opening shot of Episode 3 is another really great example. There's just so much to include, and I think it's a great first step that it is coming to X-Wing and it is coming to Legion. Legion's also a really good game for the Clone Wars. I think X-Wing has been asked about for forever, and so it's nice to see it coming to all these other games, but it's you know, very easy to notice the one glaring omission, which was Armada, when so many other games now are getting Clone Wars. Destiny already has it, you know, and so, you know, Legion and X-Wing are getting it. So what's going to happen with Armada and the Clone Wars? So what I think is, first off, before we really answer this question, I think we have to keep in mind that Armada is a much slower game as far as releasing new product. And I don't think you can expect to get new stuff for Armada with the pace that other games like Legion and X-Wing are getting stuff. First off, X-Wing just had 2.0 come out. So X-Wing is on a very quick pace right now. Also, it's like one of the hottest games on the planet. So easily justifiable to put out new products for X-Wing very quickly, and now that X-Wing is going to have 7 factions, and I think that's where it's going to stop. I don't know if we're going to go any more than 7 factions, at least not in the immediate future. Maybe someday, maybe in a couple more years, maybe we could, in theory, get like Chiss or something like that, but I think we're going to stick with 7 for a while. Now, Legion is new, so and Legion, from what I understand, is doing extremely well. You know, with its relative newness. It just came out this year in 2018. So Legion's doing great, and it's again, for a game that's new and successful, it's easy to justify pushing out a ton of content. So Legion has a very bright future ahead of it as well, and the initial reactions to Legion have been huge. So Legion makes sense also to get Clone Wars factions. But Armada is a little bit older, doesn't have, you know, a whole new version or anything like that coming out, so there's not like there's a 2.0 for Armada. There's no big news for Armada outside of the Super Star Destroyer, which was tremendous news, but isn't enough to ramp it up to the point where it's just, oh my gosh, now all of a sudden this game's going to be so popular that we need to, you know, have 5 times as many expansions. You know, Armada's like a once-a-year game now. I think, as if you're an Armada player, I think that's something you just have to understand is it's, you know, slowing down to about a one expansion or one wave a year game. So so now, with that in mind, I think it's going to, you know, depend a lot on how the Clone Wars, you know, factions do in X-Wing and also in Imperial Assault. I'm sorry, rather Legion. So let's go ahead and take a look. Now, I asked this question at the in-flight report. The audio wasn't really great on my stream. There was a lot of people laughing and everything, and then so on some of the other streams. So I had another recorder set up, so just to get a different perspective. This one was a little closer to the speakers.
We have a microphone here. So if anyone has a question, please feel free to walk out and take a nice Oreo line.
You can do it!
And we'll take some questions. Audience participation.
So, hi, my name is Tim. I run a YouTube channel called Crabbok, and I do a lot of Armada stuff as well as X-Wing, Legion, and all the Star Wars stuff. But Armada's always been my #1 game. I noticed that you guys mentioned Clone Wars factions for all these games, but I didn't hear that for Armada, so is that something that you're considering?
I think it seems like an omission, right?
Yeah. All right. Well,
I can't say anything about it yet, but okay, might be onto something.
Keep that on the radar.
Thank you. I knew that.
So you can see basically that, you know, basically they can't say anything about it yet, but it sounds like he said, no, it was still kind of hard to hear the audio, but it sounds like Andrew Navarro was saying that I might be onto something or that they might have something.
Can't say anything about it yet, but might be onto something.
It's one of those two, and it is a little bit hard because, you know, there was a big audience reaction of like laughter or discussion that kind of overwrote the response. So it was a little hard to hear it out, but, and let me know in the comments, do you think he was saying, you know, it sounds like he said, I can't say anything about it yet, but you might be onto something. That's what I think he said. I might be onto something. But it also might be that, it could be that I can't say anything about it yet, but we might have something. Something along those lines. So I think one thing that you can take away from that is that he didn't want to get caught saying something too early. Like at the previous Gen Con when he said we have something big coming. Well, granted that wasn't particularly specific, but that was definitely a hint. And I think it was too early for him to say that. So that's certainly something that could happen. That they may have something, but it may be farther down the line. The other thing to think about is that it might be something very different. Perhaps it might not just be new factions. Maybe it'll be a new core set. Maybe it'll be a new game altogether. Maybe a Clone Wars are coming to Armada, but in a whole different format. Maybe it's a complete restructuring. Maybe it will be an Armada 2.0. And maybe next year's Gen Con will be a good time to announce something like that because Legion will have slowed down a little bit. X-Wing 2.0 will have, I don't want to say faded, but will have been out for enough time such that we, you know, will have hopefully everything out. So, you know, that the hype will have gone down a little bit and they might need something new to hype by that time, and that might be Armada. You know, they kind of stagger the hype a little bit. You know, last year's Gen Con, it was Legion. This year's Gen Con, it was X-Wing 2.0. And then maybe next year's Gen Con, well, actually, that was also Keyforge, too. There was a whole lot of, you know, things to get excited about. But as far as the Star Wars realm, it was definitely X-Wing 2.0. And maybe next year, it will be Armada again. And if that's the case, I might have to make it a point to go there. I'm not sure if I'm going to go back to Gen Con or not. I'm still trying to decide because while it was very, very exciting, it was also exhausting and expensive. So, you know, there's a lot of things to consider when figuring out if you're going to go back. So basically, I am of the mindset that I think this could totally come to Armada, but I think it's going to depend on the success of the way it works in X-Wing, the way it works in Legion. And, you know, and if those are very successful, I have no doubt that they will push towards it. But if they do, I definitely hope that we get a new core set, maybe a cheaper introductory offer, basically a way to get like an essentials pack, a way to get into the game cheaper. I'm hoping the new factions have a way that they maybe play quicker, and such that, you know, because that's one criticism is the game can take much too long. And so I would love to see these games, you know, your games be done in like an hour to an hour and a half, as opposed to 2 to 2.5 hours. I would like for there to be games that can be played in less than an hour. Maybe even an alternate rule set that can allow for quicker play would be you know, like a quick match. Like, do you want to play a normal game or do you want to play a quick match? Maybe you could have a quick match tournament one week and then a normal game tournament the next week. You know, and all kinds of different things like that. That would be, you know, things like that could factor into, you know, a new set of factions coming out that would, you know, all basically rebuild the game without necessarily having to make it a 2.0. I would like that. Another thing that would be really, really exciting if they did Clone Wars factions is the fact that the Super Star Destroyer is now a thing, in which they said it allowed them to kind of break through a ceiling where now they have access to be able to develop much larger miniatures. Because that was one of the things, I guess, with building up the Super Star Destroyers, they didn't even know how they were going to manufacture something that large. And the Clone Wars happens to have multiple ships that are very, very, very large. The Lucrehulk, for example, the droid control ship, very, very large. And, you know, they may have to use similar methods to actually produce something like that. Also, the Malevolence, Grievous's flagship that you saw in the Clone Wars. very, very large ship, much larger than an Imperial Star Destroyer. And so, you know, it would be a cool ship to have too. You know, I'm not saying that these need to be as big as a Super Star Destroyer, but I think, because the game is on a sliding scale, they may be, you know, in that ballpark of size. You know, just much larger than an ISD, but maybe not quite as large as that. But basically, we have huge ships now as a new class of ship. And they could be considered huge ships, and I would love to take a Lucrehulk up against a Super Star Destroyer. That'd be really fun. So there's a whole lot of fun that could potentially await us in, you know, in this world of new factions. And I think the fact that they future-proofed huge ships enough, and I tried to get some information about, like, you know, at Gen Con, like, are there more huge ships that, you know, like, so this is the first huge ship, and I was just shut down. I couldn't get any information, so I didn't expect that that they'd be like, oh, well, yeah, we're also announcing X, Y, and Z, you know, but it was kind of more along the lines of like, hey, nice job future-proofing this, you know, and is this, you know, is there other stuff, like, already in the pipe, and I was just totally shut down, so, you know. You can't always get answers to everything, but we certainly tried, and that's about it. So basically, I do think Clone Wars can definitely come to Armada. I don't think it's going to be at least for another year, at least. So I'm predicting that Gen Con of next year is when we will find out something about that. But if you play X-Wing or Legion, make sure you pick up the Clone Wars factions if you play those games. And if you're on the fence, let this be your chance to jump in. Because the success of the Clone Wars factions in the other games is almost certainly going to influence the likelihood of them developing Clone Wars for Armada. Out of the hundreds and hundreds of people I taught Armada to at Gen Con, so many of them had said that if the Clone Wars came to Armada, they would be all in. So there's so many people that are just ready to jump all over this basically printing money fest of the Clone Wars. So even if you're not a fan of the Clone Wars, it represents a way to get a whole lot more people into Star Wars, a whole lot more people into our hobbies. So I think it's just a great thing for so many more reasons than just it being, you know, a prequel trilogy show. There's a whole lot of other good stuff about the Clone Wars that is really, really exciting. So I hope you guys are as anxious for it as I am, and I hope it definitely comes out. I'm calling it. I'm thinking next year at Gen Con we'll get some news. Whether it's just 2 new factions for this game, a restructuring for this game like a 2.0, or just a new rule set that kind of allows for quicker games, which also would be very, very cool, or a whole new game altogether. Could be a whole new game altogether. Maybe the ships are smaller, allows for larger, you know, bigger fleet on fleet, as opposed to like 4 ships versus 4 ships. Maybe you're looking at 12 ships versus 12 ships, and they're smaller, like in between Armada and Rebellion sized miniatures. And this allows you to get the supremacy on, you know, because you also need to keep in mind that whatever they do, they need to also allow room for sequel era ships someday. I don't expect sequel era ships to hit Armada until post Episode 9, because I think Episode 9 is going to hopefully give us the space battle that we deserve. But I think Clone Wars factions are totally viable for this game right away, but it probably won't get announced until next year's Gen Con and maybe a early 2020 release. That's my guess. But all I am is guessing. I'd like to hear what you guys have to say about it. I want to thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Share this video with your friends. Go ahead and subscribe and click that little bell for alerts so you can get notified whenever I put out new stuff. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day.